with me about intelligence, ecology, and even the future of AI. So I welcome you all for this edition of Talks EU with Dr. Balamurali G, Associate Professor in the Life Science Department at Atria University.
The idea was to introduce the students to what are insects. So when we talk about insects, you might ideally what pictures will come to your mind. It will be mostly flies, cockroaches, yes, and so on. And often I get the question, okay, you do research in insects, so why? What is it going to bring? How is it going to advance science or human life by researching in insects? So this presentation was just a primer to introduce the students to what insects mean and what you can do with these tiny creatures. So, well, let's begin with a comparison of intelligence. So we attribute intelligence to our brains. So in the panel, you can see a human brain held by a surgeon. And in the second panel, you can see a tiny speck on the finger of a person. That is actually the size of the brain of a bee, especially the European honeybee, Apis mellifera. So you can see the size scale difference. And a little bit about the importance of insects. So you can see that if this is the total number of species present on Earth, over 70% is insects. The species, insects are the most specious organisms. So you can see where do we fall in this. We are here, a tiny speck in the diversity of life. So, as I said, it accounts for about 75 to 80% of all animal species, and 5.5 million to 6 million, now the estimates are around 6 million of total identified species belongs to insects. And why are they important? They are important for many reasons. One of the best examples that I often tell my students, and which makes the research of my lab, is pollination. Insects are the major pollinating organisms for cash crops, vegetables, fruits, anything. They account for around 80% of pollination in the wild and over 90% of pollination on crops, cultivated crops. So you can just comprehend the importance of insects. Of course, insects, not only bees comprise of insects, there are a lot of other insects like flies, fruit flies, mosquitoes. We'll go through this presentation and we'll see how each of these species which are being researched on have contributed to neurobiology and also tech space. And right now we are at a juncture that the accelerated change in global dynamics have influenced insects too. So the climate change, increased occurrences of heat stresses, all of these are affecting insect population. And as I stated, there are a lot of species. Some are well studied, some are not well understood. They are declining. At least we know from reports from Europe and US that the pollinating insects, especially bees, are on their way to decline. When I say bees, you will all think about a box and bees kept on that. That actually, these honeybees, which we think about, only contributes to 7 to 11 species of 24,000 different species of bees. Yes, they are good to do research upon, so that we can maintain them. They are present in huge numbers in a colony. They keep coming back for food source so that we can train them and test them. But there are around 24,000 species of bees, wild bees, which we don't know about. So out of these 24,000 species of wild bees, more than 24,000 species of bees, India accounts for around 700, which I refuse to believe. So as far as our knowledge, there are only 700 species of bees. I think that there are more species in India than 700 simple species. So we will come to that later. So this is about the importance of insects. And so you may all know Darwin, who proposed the evolutionary biology theory. And he, in one of his reports, he mused that ants as one of the marvelous atoms of matter in the world. So two instances made him say this. On the first video, you can see black ants raiding the nest of another species. What they will do is they will raid the nest of the other species, take away the larvae, raise them as slaves so that they will do the work on their colony. He observed this in 1800s. You have to think about that. And in the second video, what you can see is that, look at this portion of this video. That's an ant gently tapping another insect called aphid. You saw that, right? They will just farm these aphids and gently tap on them. They produce something called honeydew, which is rich in sugar. So ants feed on this. In turn, aphids get protection from other predators. So it's a symbiotic mutualistic relationship. So these ants actively seek out the aphids, farm them, and milk them. It's called aphid milking. So, did you ever think that ants are capable of such complex behaviors? No, but they are. So that's why Darwin used that they are the most marvelous atoms in the world. Okay, then after Darwin, there was a lot of debate about intelligence in insects. People refused to believe that insects can do something subjectively. They were only viewed as automatons, which are programmed with instincts. They just respond to the stimuli, natural stimuli that they encounter. Beyond that, nothing, processing, neural processing, or some sort of active subjectivity was not attributed to insects in the till early 1900s. So it was like, why do the moth always fly to the candle? If it can think, it should fly away. And this is the most curious case which made the scientists believe that they are just mere automatons. Here you can see a wasp, which it's a predatory wasp, which hunts other insects, takes it to its burrow, lay eggs on it, so that its larvae can eat on that insect and grow up. So, but the problem is that every time this insect brings its prey, it will keep it in the threshold, go inside its burrow, check it, and come back. So this French scientist, Jean-Henri Fabre, did experiments by simply moving the prey a little back. But he observed that every time he did that, irrespective of how many times, the wasp will come, drag it to the certain point, again go, check, and come back. So he attributed that it as just a mere response to a stimuli. It's a fixed action pattern wired to its neural hardware. So it cannot modify that. It will keep doing that. So he concluded that insects cannot think, or I'm not saying in the literal sense think, it's not capable of doing anything beyond their instincts. Keep that in mind. It will come in handy in extreme years. Okay, this again is to compare brain sizes across kingdoms and species. So it's our brain, human brain, which weighs around roughly 1.5 kilograms. And you can just see that it's a small rodent whose brain just weighs over 150 grams. So there is a question, like I said, we had a belief that intelligence is scaled across the brain sizes. The higher the brain size, it makes sense in one way, because the larger number of neurons, the larger the processing power. Just compare it to a small computer with 1 core CPU to a 20 core CPU. That's the difference. So, but nature is not like that. Nature always based on the evolutionary theory, nature always try to optimize maximum returns out of minimum investment. So some sort of neural economy can it be achieved in these tiny brains. So we will find that out. Okay, this all changed in 1914 with this guy called Carl von Frisch. So this is a picture of him from the 1965. He got the Nobel in 1965 or 64, if I am not wrong, for finding out what he found out that as a young PhD student, he observed bee colonies and he found a strange thing. Whenever a bee goes out to forage and comes back, what she does is that she will come back to her hive and she will start to dance. And the dance is also very specific. It has a round component, then a zigzagging waggle component. It's called waggle dance later. So through his observations and experiments, by changing the distance of the feeder in which they get food, what Carl von Frisch showed is that they are indeed communicating the direction and distance of the food source to the nestmates. You can see that she is dancing at one particular angle. So what happens is, in relation to the position of the sun, she will change the dance direction. The waggle phase, how many times she waggles, or the time for which she waggles, determines the distance, while the angle to the sun tells the other bee the direction. So they have a clever neural mechanism which compensates for the sun's position too. So when a bee goes out, comes back to her hive and dances, and the other bee learns that, and she comes out, the sun might have moved in the horizon. So they have something called sun compensated compass in their heads. So they will, the moment, based on the time they come out, they will compensate for the sun's change in position. So these tiny brains are able to do such marvelous tasks. And Carl von Frisch again showed that bees can see color. And it's out of curiosity, how many of you knew that actually bees or insects can actually see color? No one knew, right? Yeah. So they have color vision. And later research which showed that bees especially have better color vision than humans. So we humans have blue, green and red sensitive cones in our eyes. So this, you can see that the green and red are overlapping. This is a very recent gene duplication event in primates. So how many of you have heard about old world and new world monkeys? Okay, so it's mammals are usually dichromatic. So this was a dichromatic, means they have two opsin genes coding for color. So in humans, as part of a recent gene duplication event, we evolved a red photosensitive receptor. Why? Can you guess that? So at course of evolution, we had to differentiate between ripe and unripe fruits. So that is the driving force behind this gene duplication event. And natural selection favored populations with these genes so that we can differentiate ripe and unripe fruit. So can anyone guess why bees should have color vision? Why? Flowers. So interestingly, we have blue, green and red. Bees do not have a red receptor. They have green, blue and UV sensitive receptor. So then the researchers said, why should bees have UV sensitive receptors? And later research into flowers and flower colors have shown that this is how we see a flower. And this might be how a bee might see a flower if they have high resolution vision. Unfortunately, they don't have high resolution vision. They might see a bee from a 10 centimeter distance like this, if the flower is 1 centimeter. So what happens there is that most of the flowers have UV reflecting pigments. Why? So its flowers are not there just to attract us. It is there to attract bees. So now the consensus is that the radiation of angiosperm, all the trees that you see around you, got diversified in a short period of time. It is called great angiosperm radiation, mediated by color vision of the pollinators. So trees and plants make flowers to attract bees. So this is the current consensus among evolutionary biologists, that all the flower colors have evolved to accommodate the visual space of pollinators, especially insects. Okay, so far so good. We now know that insects can see color, they can dance. Is it this? Later, so in bees, bee research started around 1914. So it has been over a century of research into bees. Very recently, a group in UK showed that they can actually learn complex tasks. So the sugar solution is placed here. One of the bees were trained to access this sugar solution by doing a complex task. She has to pull the blue tab first, then push the red tab, then access the sugar. Okay, then you might be thinking that, so for my students it will not be very interesting, because they know that we can train the bees to do this. That itself is amazing, because they have the capacity to learn that. Okay, then why is it so cool? Because this bee did not get trained. She just observed another individual doing this. She just learned by observing without reinforcement, which we thought was only limited to higher invertebrates. This is the first case in an invertebrate. People showed that they can actually learn by looking at what others do. It doesn't stop there. This is the demonstrated bee again. So the trained bee was there. She looked at how the other bee is doing it, nestmate is doing it, then she is doing the same. Not only this. See, sugar is inside. She just lands. If she has to access the sugar water, she has to pull the string. She is doing that. This is also without training, by just observing others. If human demonstrators do that, they also learn. See, no, you can train. You can train them. So it's called Pavlovian conditions. You associate, we do it usually in our labs. With sugar solution, you can just train the bees or the butterflies to do whatever task you want. That has reinforcement, associative conditioning. But the cool thing here is that they are not learning by associative conditioning, they are learning by observing, which we thought that only limited to higher primates and all. Okay, then bees. I'm just including a lot of bee references. Then we'll move along to wasps. These are called paper wasps. These are species, Polistes fuscatus, is distributed around North America. We also have paper wasp and potter wasps like Rhopalidia and all. So can you just spot any differences between these individuals? They all look different, right? Usually in insect colonies, social insect colonies, everyone will look same. They differentiate individuals using odor. But in this species, they are differentiating, these are all from one colony. They differentiate themselves using the markings on the face. This was the first case where they showed that with their tiny eyes, they can recognize individual members of the colony by looking at their face. Then, why is it important? So this is the famous Margaret Thatcher illusion, where this is her face. You are able to recognize her in any position, with any rearrangement, right? That it's Margaret Thatcher. Look at the other pictures. Why is this important? This shows that even as humans recognize a face not just based on individual component. We look for global signatures. So that is why you are able to recognize her if she is upside down or not. So that requires a lot of processing power in the brain, lot of neural connections. Its processing is mostly done in visual cortex of human brain, which is highly sophisticated. Then in 2017, some French scientists trained wasps to see whether they can recognize faces, and they do. So when we recognize face, we look for global patterns, and the understanding was that it requires a lot of processing power. But the researchers trained wasps to differentiate faces, and they could do it with their tiny brains. So it was a very fascinating research which showed that to process the face, you don't require a lot of neural processing. And next comes binocular vision that we all take for granted. So we can estimate depth. So if I am walking like this, if I am depth blind, so I will fall down, trip and fall down. So we estimate depth. And how do we estimate depth? Because our two eyes will have two different fields of view. These images are superimposed in our brain through all these complex pathways. It will pass through the optic nerve to the optic chiasm, then sends back to visual cortex, then sends the signal back to it require a lot of. So how many of you have had eye tests? You look at the horopter to a distant house, right? So this is estimating the depth, how good is your depth vision and all. This also requires a lot of processing power. But here comes mantises. So we covered bees, wasps, and now mantises. These are praying mantises. This is a leaf praying mantis. This is on top of ISER Trivandrum, where I was doing my bee experiments when I spotted this guy. And you can see that that's one of my earbuds. You can see her attacking the buds when it's moving, and she's moving along with you have to pay close attention to her movements. And she's doing a sort of dance, right, after attacking. Keep that in mind. And these are voracious predators. Sometimes they are called the aliens in insect world, because in the second video you can see that it's a bird feeder. These are hummingbirds. They can easily chew through a hummingbird in a matter of minutes. So why are they important? The lab I have been in Newcastle worked on mantises, and the question they asked was, they are very precise in attacking. Do they have sort of binocular vision? So to that end, what Vivek, my PI, did was, he put 3D glasses onto praying mantises to see whether they can. He became really famous with these videos, and it was a nice set of experiments. I have helped him putting glasses on. It's very difficult. It's not as easy as it seems. It's very tiny crystals. We fix it through Loctite, and they found out that yes, indeed they have binocular vision. And what they found out was that you can see that these insects, this is called peering motion. Insects overcame the processing power required for binocular vision by moving the field of view. So we have two eyes which have produces two images which is stitched together, then sent back to the. So they are just changing their field of view and getting the rough parameters of depth estimation. Okay, fine. We now know that at least this insect, which is fairly big, have 3D vision or depth vision. Then later, in 2017, Lisa Fenka and her group showed that these are fruit flies, tiny fruit flies. When you keep the fruits or banana in your home, you can see that there's a tiny specks. There's a really tiny. For scale, you can see that it's only 1 micrometer in length, 1 to 1.5. Oh, sorry, millimeter. Sorry. So they said, hold my coffee, and they made them walk. Yes, small fruit flies, Drosophila. It's wild. So what they did is that they made them walk inside the lab on a smaller contraption which has a chiasm here, depth. So if the insect is able to cross this, that means that they have depth vision, right? So you can see that she is estimating the distance. See, and her front legs are here. And I'll replay the video and just look at the top part. So that is roughly, they don't have actual retina. That is actually the retinal part or equivalent of that moving along its eye. That was very important. So how can you get 3D vision? Either you change your peering direction, or you have two eyes which makes distinct images and converts it, which requires more processing power. Or you can be the flies. You have muscles in your eye which pulls your retina back and forth. So you get two fields of vision. So if they, for us it's fixed, right? You cannot move the eyes forward and backward. So what these flies do is they just change based on their inside they have tiny muscles which pulls the entire eyes back and forth, so that they will get two different images and they can estimate depth. Yeah. Yeah. So imagine I showed you a bee brain in the beginning, right? Drosophila brains are 100 times smaller than that. So they are achieving this with that tiny brains. Okay, finally we'll come back to Darwin's marvelous atoms, ants. Well, this is a desert ant which actually goes out in a featureless desert to find food from the nest, and it will take a perilous path, find food. But whenever they come back, most of the social insects, when they go out and they come back, they more or less take a direct path home. It's like they have a GPS in them. Indeed, they have a GPS. What they do is that, like bees, they calculate or summate the vector in their brains for each and every turn that they take, so that while they are coming back in reference to the sun, they can just take the straight path. And they are capable of one more trick. They can count their steps too. So how researchers found that? So they took the desert ants. In few individuals, they cut their leg in half, and few individuals they put artificial stilts on their legs. So they trained them to walk exactly 5 steps to, this is just for reference, it's not exactly 5 steps, 5 or 10 steps to collect food. Come back. Then the ant will walk 5 steps and start searching for the food if they are trained. So they have learned that if you take 5 steps, you will get food. Then what happened with the individuals whose legs were cut? They will walk 5 steps, they will never reach the food solution. Whenever they took the 5 steps, they will start. They just undershot the test. But the individuals with these stilts will overstep. They will go further beyond and start searching. So that's how they found out that they can indeed count the steps. So they can use the sun, they can use that too in a featureless desert. They don't have any landmarks to orient. They can count the steps. And the first slide that I have shown you. Now, no, it depends on the foraging duration. If they are getting food nearby, they will immediately drag it back. No, they have sun compensated compass. So they can compensate for the sun's movement. So I'll tell you an anecdote. My professor in Atria, she worked on these bees which fly at night, large carpenter bees. So one of the things with these insects is that you just displace them from its nest and release them at some point, they can come back. So this was done in Pune. These individuals were taken some 25 kilometers far from their homes at night and released. Then someone waited at the entrance. After a few hours, they came back. They fly back at night. So they can compensate for a lot of things. So when the insects are flying at night, so there are, how many of you heard about dung beetles, which roll piles of dung? You know what celestial cue that they use? Oh, this was an Ig Nobel winning work in Meridake from Lund University where I worked. They use Milky Way. They use the entire Milky Way as celestial queue while rolling the dunk files. So they did this experiment inside a big planetarium where the Milky Way was projected onto the top and the directionality of their, and they can even use polarization patterns in the sky. So
for example, you take a be in a matchbox from place 1 to B in the night, will it be able to vector compensate and come back by the shortest?
if it's a experience B, if it has not flown out of the nest yet, no. So here also in front of the battery lab, you might have noticed that sometimes morning and evening, a lot of bees are coming out and orienting. These are called orientation flights, where they are learning the location of the hive in regard to the sun's position and the landmarks nearby. If the bees have done that, they can easily come back. If the bees, yeah. So to answer the question, why do specs wasps repeat this behavior again and again? So
Regarding those small flies or bees,
how the flies? No, it's not orientation behavior.
just opposite your lab. Last week we saw many of them at a certain time, just for 1 hour.
No, if it's bees, they come out at certain times, early in morning and evening. They do orientation flights. The duration and the frequency of these orientation flights also change with seasons.
They come at certain location, not that we are
Because they are, so these are looping flights. If you observe it clearly, you can see that it starts at a bigger diameter, then it closes down, and then it goes. So they are taking these lengthy loopy flights to learn the landmarks. Okay, so Fabre thought insects were automaton because specs wasp will go back to its hive every time to check. So why is it? So you can see that she kept her prey outside, checked, and this time she was successful. No one moved her prey. She took it inside. And you can see that that is a robber fly. So the wasp is making sure every time that there are no parasites or predators inside. That is why it keeps repeating this, what is called specificness. So the moment she comes out and some robber flies goes in there, she will be in trouble. So it pays to have OCD in this case, because you have to check again and again to make sure that your nest is free of predators or parasites. And now we know that bees can understand the concept of zero. This is the work from Scarlett Howard from Australian National University. Then they can count up to 4. These are European honeybees. One of my master's students and we did repeat this experiment with our Asian honeybees in ISA Trivandrum, and we know that they can count more than 4. That work is still unpublished. And they can even play. If you give them tiny balls, for no reason they will start playing, which is considered as one of the behaviors evolved from culture. Then finally, this paper got published last year, again with ants, which compared problem solving. These are tiny black ants with a T-bar, and it's a puzzle. They have to get it through this tiny opening. And this same thing was repeated with humans. So the speed is same. So both videos are playing at the same speed. So one is not. See, it took a mere few minutes when compared to the humans, which show that their collective intelligence. In this case, you have to say that each individual ant does not know what to solve. It's a swarm. It's collective intelligence which solve these puzzles. And one more interesting trivia about ants is that a couple of years ago, one paper came out. If one of the worker ant gets injured while going for foraging or getting attacked by the ants, perform surgery. They will amputate. If the worker is supposed to survive, they will amputate one leg and carry it back to the. If they know that the worker is not going to survive, they will leave it and come back. So these are tiny examples of how their brains work, how amazing their brains are. Coming to that, this is how a brain of an insect will look like. Most of that is attributed to this. Is attributed to optic lobe. We call it as optic lobe visual processing in most of the pollinating insects. I'm not going to dwell more on this. And scientists from USA, Howard Hughes Institute of Medical Sciences in India, came up with the entire connectome of a fly brain recently. So they mapped each and every neuron in the fly brain and how many synaptic connections that they make. Look at the number of neurons. 139,000 neurons around. How many synapses do they make? 54.5 million connections. Human brains will have more than 1.2 billion neurons. Can you imagine the profoundness of the connections, synaptic connections that will make? And do you think that it's possible in near future to map out the entire human brain? It's not going to be possible. So, which I will come why study insects later. So, and even though they are tiny, they have really cool adaptations to overcome the overload coming from information. So here I'll just skip through it. These are two odors. One is rose and one is lavender. So these bees have around 180 odor receptors. If they didn't have nice processing, it will be a dense mess, overlapping mess. But in their mushroom body, one of the brain parts, what happens is that there is something called, computer science people might have heard about combinatorial coding. That happens, combination of happens, and they simplify these signals. I will come to why this is important, and this is widely employed in computer science too. So now we will talk about from biology to bites. So we know that insects are capable of doing all this amazing stuff. Why does it matter? The first example is what we discussed now. The odors, how odors are processed. So each flower will have mixture of odors. How are these tiny brains able to identify, detect these odors in matter of milliseconds, which leads to something called sparse coding, which is adopted in computer science, while mostly in extreme learning machines and locality sensitive hashing. Search engines employ this to retrieve results faster. Rather than firing them up and going through all the entire database, you make combinatorial connections, predetermined connections, which will make the identification or searching easier. This is one of the examples. Then fly visual model. We saw that how good their visual processing is. So fly visual systems react in less than 30 milliseconds. Is which is called the Hasselstein-Reichardt detector in neurobiology. And what it does is, it's spatial and temporal data it pulls together, and through simple processing you can see that photoreceptor input, there is a delay in here from both sides that will be detected by motion detector neuron and passed. So no higher end processing is needed. This is widely employed in drones which have to fly, that navigate dense forests. So you have to take millisecond decisions based on less computing power and faster decisions. So this will also help in reducing the power consumption and computational requirements by 1,000 times. Symbol sensors based on insect visual systems. And the most striking example is from this locust. These are locusts which are pests destroying farmlands. So they fly in swarms. They fly in swarms of billions together. So they have to avoid bumping into each other. So that is done by a single neuron called lobular giant movement detector, one neuron which projects into the brain. And people have adapted this to design collision avoidance chips. This is entirely based on the lobular movement detector neurons. Then
How did they get down to that identifying the similar?
we cut open the head, put electrodes into the brain of the insects, show them the stimuli, and we'll see whether the neurons are firing or not, which neuron is firing, and what is the reaction time. So then we track it back to the processing centers in the brain. So most in one of the other example where one neuron controls the entire maneuvering is dragonflies. Dragonflies are highly visual. 90% of their brain, their head is made up of their eyes. They are extremely visual. They can just track the prey with the input from only one neuron. So this is another example where if you want to design a small drone or small excavatory vehicle without GPS to get it back, how will you design it? You can use the AND logic, some vector summation and step counts. So if that will take away a lot of requirement for computational power and battery, it will save battery energy power. In terms of GPS is a battery drainer. So if you have a small program which actually accounts for the vector, the turns that take, you can design a vehicle. So that is actually done in simultaneous localization and mapping machines, SLAM machines, which can navigate by counting the steps or distance traveled by tracking a light source. If it's a vehicle sent to survey Mars, it can use the sun or moon, or subterranean search and rescue vehicles can be designed like this. And we talked about collaboration, right? Swarm intelligence, collective intelligence, which can be used. You have seen Amazon warehouse where robots work. That is none other than swarm collective intelligence. And the drone shows and precision agriculture, and recently drones used in war. This is all run on collective intelligence softwares where they communicate with each other, the drones and the robots. And now we know that with all this, they are susceptible to stress and climate change. And my last postdoc, the lab where I worked, Vivek, now we looked into whether insects have emotions, not in the subjective term of emotion as we require, but they do tend to show affective states, and it's tightly coupled with the biogenic amine levels like serotonin, octopamine, and dopamine, which controls human emotions. So all I am suggesting is that they don't think and they feel subjectively like that. They can be preliminary models to study all these conditions too. You saw the complexity of human brains and ethical issues studying higher invertebrates and humans. So why not insects? Insects are becoming models for many of these things. If their affective states are determined by amines, which do the same to us, why not study affective states in insects? Then recently, this was a very nice coincidence. When I was making this article came a couple of days back, last week. This is from University of Sheffield. They have a startup or a company industry called Optren Technologies, which is they are just developing a software mind for natural autonomy. Like we discussed, this swarms, collective intelligence, and all. They do work with flies, bees, dragonflies, etc. And they are trying to build robots or software taking insights from how they respond in the experiments and how their neural systems fire. So the recent article was about, I showed you that the flies twitch their bodies to adjust their eyesight. They can respond even less than in 30 milliseconds is what the recent findings, which is very important to make faster decisions. And they are telling that this technology, they are just trying to integrate this into collision avoidance to be faster in self-driving cars. Okay, that's it. And these are few insects from our campus. I don't know how many of you pay attention to the insects. This is the dragonfly. You can see that most of his head is its eyes. And this is a moth, which feeds on the palm tree here. That's a great palm. It's not a moth, sorry. It's a butterfly, but it's called a Hesperidae. It's a transition state between a butterfly and a moth. It's we call it a skipper butterflies. You can see its eyes. They can see very well during night in crepuscular times. And these are common butterflies, and that's a wasp collecting pollen. Okay, any question?
Just curious, how long does it take for someone to master the art of implanting these chips and sensors into insects? You said that sensors were implanted, right?
Oh no. So it's called electrodes. So we just put for it's that field is called electrophysiology. So what we do is we open the brain, and while the insect is alive, and they will be restrained, and the stimuli will be shown to them. Maybe it's like a looming stimuli, and we record the response from the neuron or the neurons surrounding that area. So it's a very fine. It takes a little bit time to master, because most of the new students kill the animal first prick. So it takes a little bit, and the rig, electrophysiology rig, is very expensive. So in the lab where I worked, they did this with mantises.
You mentioned that you inserted crystals.
It's not crystal, yeah, it's the glasses. Glass. Yeah, that's on top of the eye to make the vision 3D. Then the insect was hanged upside down. So for people, it's very difficult to imagine in front of a computer screen where the stimuli was shown, the disparity was shown, to see whether they can see the 3D picture or not.
Glasses.
Yeah.
Like human glasses.
Yeah, tiny.
You had even power to it, or did you
No, that was done. These were manufactured way before I joined the lab. So I have only seen them as that. I'm not sure how they made it.
that also you have to decide based on the insects?
Yeah, eye size. So mostly there are different sizes. So mostly female insects were used to do these experiments. Okay, so I didn't tell you. So in my lab, we study brains and how it is affected by climate change, specifically heat stress, and how their decision making changes using paradigms, learning paradigms. We will train them to associate cues, then reverse it, and finally we are going to cut open their brains and look at it in a microcity to see that heat stress have any effect on brain areas, differential investment, whether brain areas shrink or grow large to accommodate for the processing power. So that is one other aspect where efficiency of neural systems come into power.
Because they must be adopted for certain already, because of that they are here.
Yeah.
For example, in our campus, they know the temperature in campus is this, the wind and whatever factors which they are. Now, when you create a stress, that means something is different than what they are used to.
The physiology.
So, do you have that microscale data?
No, so that is my ANRF proposal. We know that their behavior changes, we know that their physiology changes, but we don't know how their cognition changes. So behavior ultimately changes because of cognition, cognitive processes getting changed, but we don't have fine scale data about it anywhere.
Because that level climate data, right?
No. So that buffer is always there. So 1 or 2 degrees, 1 degree Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius change for half an hour is not going to change anything in their behavior, even for humans. So there was an experiment which was done with school students, university students. They were put in a room without AC and with AC, and they found interestingly that students undergoing heat stress have lesser cognitive performance than students under ideal climate. So In humans and vertebrates, we know that it affects it. How it affects, we don't know.
See, this is like weather parameters.
Yeah.
But climate change and all we can't, because these species have to be there like 10 years back. Their life experience.
No, let me clarify. We are looking into heat stress, not long-term climate change. Heat stress.
How do you provide them?
In incubators. So it's like extreme heat events. Rather than giving them heat stress for the entire lifespan, we are just mimicking the natural condition where there will be, like Bangalore had last 1 or 2 weeks, high periods of high intensity heat. That's it. How it is.
And then you are just checking. So you have trained them for a task, you give them interest, and you're checking for that same
Yes.
task.
Yeah. Control group
General
without
behavioral changes.
general behavioral changes will
in
be.
a sense, because they've gone through heat stress. Do other behaviors change, like what is it, whatever? I don't know, but one part is cognition, right?
Yeah.
How well they can perform their task again. It's fine. But as a response to that, because they've gone through that stress, do they change certain other behaviors?
Definitely. So
Do you track?
no, it's very difficult to track because all these behavioral experiments are under ideal conditions. Ideal condition in our control group is 27 degrees Celsius and 60% humidity inside the incubator. We cannot use a control group which is right outside because the variation is so much. So all behavioral data, it is a baseline. There are cases which deviates. Oh, of course, because I worked with bees and we showed that if you stress a bee, if you pinch or shake them in a box and release them, they become sad. They expect less reward.
Plus, along with that, they make, because in real life condition, you have to mimic the air pressure also. Because they will be out.
Huh.
So the winds, the air pressure, other factors are also.
No, it will never be possible to do a behavioral experiment by controlling all the parameters. So we are looking at, so it's a reductionistic approach of doing things. So there will be n number of things which will affect the results. That's why in behavior, it's very difficult to design experiments which are very highly reproducible. So unifying large principles, yes. Okay, if bees can learn color, that is not going to change. But when it comes to finer aspect, that okay, if this condition is given, bees might do this. If you test it after 2 times, when that condition is not there, it might not. That's why we explicitly state that okay, they are lab rare. Okay, thank you. Thank you.